If you guys are absolute degenerates like us, I'm sure you have rookie drafts flying fast and furious right now. And we figured we'd break down our top 24 Superflex rookie tier list rankings, going through, who do we take at each pick, where are the tier breaks. I'm sure this will be a very, very valuable video for those of you guys that are in rookie drafts right now. Of course, if you do want all of our rookie rankings, if you want our updated Dynasty overall Superflex one quarterback rankings, our next edition of our Dynasty trade value chart, which will be coming out tomorrow, you can head on over to flockfantasy.com and use the promo code FSE when you sign up for 30% off, a 7-day free trial, all that good stuff. And we also do have that promotion going right now where new users on Underdog Fantasy using the promo code FSE will get our Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide and our Dynasty Film Breakdowns for free. So all that housekeeping aside, Danny, how you doing?
Doing well, doing well. And yeah, of course, we saw the bullets fly out of the chamber. The NFL draft obviously officially finished on Saturday, and ton of context to be breaking down. Obviously, we know the landing spots, we know the draft capital. We had our pre-draft rankings in suit. Now we're ready to unveil our post-draft NFL rookie rankings.
Yeah, so let's not waste any time. Let's get right into this. We got Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison, 1-1 and 1-2 in some order. I'm sure a lot of people are going to ask the question, would you take Marvin Harrison over Caleb Williams in this situation? Because I also hold the 105. I also have the 106. I also have the 104. Whatever pick you also have in addition to 101, some people are going to wonder, is the value package of Caleb Williams at 101 and, say, Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze better than the value package of, say, Marvin Harrison at 101 and Drake May or Jaden Daniels falling to them with their other pick? For me, I stand firm that you take Caleb Williams 101 and you hope that Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze is the option for you there at, say 104 to 106.
Yeah, and we do have the what would we do at each pick type of breakdown coming up. The 101 to 104, the 105 to 108, the 109 to 112 coming in terms of draft strategy. But in terms of like box standard rankings, yeah, it has to be Caleb Williams. It has to be Marvin Harrison Jr. in that order for me. The context would be, of course, if you have like Joe Burrow and Anthony Richardson and you have the 101 and you've done your due diligence, you're not able to trade down to 102 plus, you're not able to trade for one of the top 3 wide receivers on the market. Then at that point, I'm not going to fault you for taking Marvin Harrison Jr. because from a startup cost standpoint, both of them are going to be at least 1-2 turn picks. Caleb Williams more so a top 10 type of startup pick. Marvin Harrison kind of finding his way on that 12 to 14 type of area. So although, Caleb Williams has a higher market cost, they're at least in the same range to the point where if I'm forced by hand, I'm not able to make a move, I'm comfortable taking Marvin Harrison Jr. there because he still has the opportunity to be the wide receiver one on the market after a year. He still has the opportunity to be the 105, 106 in startups after the year. And although we expect that for Caleb, Marvin also has that type of ceiling.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at these two guys just as a projection standpoint, when we come off of the NFL draft, Caleb Williams goes into a situation where he's got 3 great wide receivers to throw to, a solid NFL tight end, 3 capable running backs behind him. The offense and the coaching scheme is the really only concern I have with Caleb Williams because I trust his ability. I trust the talent around him. With Marvin Harrison, he goes into a situation where he's the only show in town in Arizona outside of Trey McBride, who, in my opinion, probably benefited from the lack of targets last year in that Cardinals offense. Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison are going to make sound music for the long term because we've seen Kyler Murray feed his number 1 receiver from 2020 to 2022. DeAndre Hopkins averaged over 10 targets per game with Kyler Murray. So we're looking at a situation where both of these guys are going to be stalwarts at their position. Both of them have the ability really to climb to the top 3, even potentially top overall spot at their individual positions, which is why at 101 and at 102, we're not getting cute with these guys. We're drafting Caleb Williams or Marvin Harrison Jr. Do you need a wide receiver? Do you need a quarterback? If you're picking 101, 90% of the time I'm taking Caleb Williams, but like you said, there is those specialized circumstances. League formats would factor into this too. If you're in a heavy wide receiver league where there's, first down bonuses or anything like that to the wide receiver position, full PPR, start 3 wide receivers, 3 flexes, and it's only, a 4-point per passing touchdown super flex or something, maybe you go Harrison over Caleb in that situation. But for the most part, it's Caleb Williams 1, Marvin Harrison 2.
Yeah, exactly. There are some contextual situations, but the majority of the time, if you have the 101, you will be selecting Caleb Williams, and that's what we'd be doing as well. So we can move on to the next tier. I feel like across the board, 101, 102, you ask whoever, it's going to be the same 2 players with Caleb and Marvin Harrison. The order of this 103 to 105 area will be dicey depending on who you ask, but for our sake, Drake May, Malik Neighbors, Jaden Daniels, we both have it in that order, and I'll start off with Drake May. I mean, he goes third overall to the New England Patriots. And in terms of our evaluation, he graded closer to a guy like Caleb Williams than he was quarterback 3 from a prospect standpoint. The arm talent, the mobility, the size, the intangibles he brings to the table are that of a first overall pick caliber quarterback, in my opinion. So him even falling to 3, if you are a New England Patriots fan, you got to be popping the champagne bottles. You got to be celebrating. New England ends up taking 2 wide receivers in the draft as well, with Jalen Polk at 37th overall, with Javon Baker in the 4th round. 2 guys I had graded inside my top 13. They pair with Demario Douglas. So if you're worried about, the New England offense being a catastrophe, this new regime has really told me they want to support Drake May and getting wide receivers that fit how Drake May wins.
Yeah, exactly. Polk is a reliable target over the middle of the field. No quarterback in this class graded better over the middle of the field than Drake May did, according to PFF. Drake May also pushed the ball downfield at a higher rate than anybody else in this class, other than Michael Penix. And of course, Michael Penix had those 3 great receivers at Washington. Guess what? Guess where Javon Baker wins? It's going to be down the field. So, like you said, they got players that fit his skill set. It's good enough for his rookie season. Maybe those guys don't develop into number 1 alpha wide receivers. Maybe they're more Jalen Polk's a good number 2, Javon Baker's a good number 3, Demario Douglas a good number 4. Okay, well, they're going to have assets next offseason to go out and sign or trade for a T. Higgins, a Brandon Ayuk, one of these wide receivers that may be available in free agency, or maybe they'll have another high draft pick and they could take a Luther Burden. They could take Tet McMillan or some of the wide receiver prospects in the 2025 class. So with Drake May, he's going to be the guy in this tier, I would imagine, that is going to fall the most. He might fall to 106. He might fall to 107 if people like the JJ McCarthy landing spot better, if they like Rome Odunze to the Bears better. Sometimes you're going to see Drake May fall. For us, he is still ranked as the 103, and I tweeted it out when it happened. Nothing against Jaden Daniels. I think he has a chance to be a good quarterback at the next level, but I believe the Washington Commanders will be, kicking themselves for the next 20 years that they pass on Drake May.
Yeah, and the way this kind of works out in our rankings, Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr. being, potential first-round level startup picks. If not for Marv, at least by the 201, the 202, he should be off the board. Once you get to this 103 to 105 area, we'll talk about Malik Neighbors and Jaden Daniels in a second. These guys are more so your typical second-round startup pick. So the fact that we're talking about up to the 105 being worthy of a second-round startup pick just goes to show you the talent at the top of this class. And as we'll get into in a little bit, the depth that this class has. But I'll let you touch on Malik Neighbors and why he's just such a good prospect. I mean, you could point to just how well he graded in that FSC prospect model.
Yeah, absolutely. Him and Marvin Harrison since 2016 graded out as the best prospects that we've seen over Jamar Chase, over CeeDee Lamb, over Justin Jefferson. Again, as prospects, we're not talking about their pro projection because those guys are literally the top 3 receivers in Dynasty. But the bet that you're making on Malik Neighbors is such a sound, calculated bet. So when people look at Malik Neighbors' landing spot in New York, they might be underwhelmed a little bit because he could have went number 5 overall to the Chargers and been playing with Justin Herbert. We all would have been really excited about Malik Neighbors from that standpoint. But the cupboard is empty in New York. They don't have any good wide receivers there. Wandale's a slot receiver. Jalen Hyatt's just a deep threat. Malik Neighbors is immediately their alpha number 1 wide receiver. Daniel Jones is probably on his last year with the team because they have an out in his contract. Maybe they'll draft a guy in 2025. Maybe they'll sign a guy. Maybe they'll trade a guy. In Dynasty, we should not be focused on the immediate short-term production that we're getting out of these wide receivers. I believe Malik Neighbors will come into the NFL, be the number 1 receiver of his team, potentially commanding 130, 140, even 150 plus targets as a rookie, and have hopefully a better situation in the long term. I don't really believe Daniel Jones is a great quarterback, just like you probably don't believe Daniel Jones is a great quarterback, but he's capable enough to support Malik Neighbors getting the targets that he needs to get. And like I said, the long term is not really what I'm focused on with Malik Neighbors. He could be the next Drake London, where we just see the production, we see the target share, we see the receiving grade, we see the film, and he looks like a stud. And in the long term, we're just hoping for better quarterback play. That's the way I look at it with Malik Neighbors. He is the type of guy that you just thank your lucky stars you get at 104, 105 in a rookie draft, because in most classes, last year's included, he probably would have been 101. He definitely would have been 101 in 2022.
Yeah, no, you're preaching to the choir. I completely agree here as well. When it comes to the situation, yeah, you can point to the fact that, as Malik Neighbors calls him, Daniel Jones is not the best quarterback in the league. But at the same time, when you're walking into a situation, like Corey said, with the available target volume that the New York Giants represent, I mean, this guy's the clear top talent in that room, and there's no reason why he can't have a 130-plus target rookie season. And I'm telling you right now, if he does that, he's going to be valued as a top 4 to 5 dynasty asset at wide receiver.
Yeah, absolutely. He has the talent to be able to do that. When the reason he graded out so well in the prospect model is because he literally checks every box possible. He has
Yeah.
elite athletic traits. He was great after the catch, great contested catch rate, everything from a trait standpoint that you want. His analytical profile in terms of the target share, the competition he had for targets, almost probably should have won the Bolitnikoff in 2023 with the production he saw. One of those green flag prospect profiles that I love, where you come in as a freshman, you produce a little bit. As a sophomore, you have a pretty solid season, 1,000 yards, 3 touchdowns. Then you blow up as a junior. You're an early declare. He was 20 years old coming into this draft, one of the youngest receivers in the class. And then obviously what he does on film, we all know he looks like jetpack Brandon Ayuk, and he can make all the plays that he needs to in the open field. He's an electric route runner, super, super high ceiling. So Malik Neighbors, again, 103 is the earliest I would take him. 105 is basically the latest I would take him, depending on your need for a quarterback. And Jayden Daniels is the final guy of this year. For me, I have a hard time passing on Malik Neighbors in favor of Jayden Daniels in a neutral situation where I don't, have a real preference between quarterback and wide receiver. Jayden Daniels comes in probably as the highest ceiling member of this group, just given what he can provide you with his legs in most people's leagues, especially in 4-point per passing touchdown, bog standard, super flex formats. Jayden Daniels is going to have a lot of value accumulation potential because he's been compared to the likes of Lamar Jackson. We've seen already what Justin Fields 2 years ago and Anthony Richardson this past year were able to do in a value accumulation standpoint because of what they can do with their legs. I'm worried about Jayden Daniels as a passer because I don't believe that Cliff Kingsbury is all that good of an NFL coach. Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, Luke McCaffrey, Ben Sinnott, the running backs they have, Austin Eckler and Brian Robinson. Don't get me wrong, it's better than some high draft pick quarterbacks have walked into, but I'm not sold that there's a superstar supporting cast around Jayden Daniels either. And I also had question marks about the player on film as a passer. So his rushing could carry him. Like, his rookie season could very well be, if it's not there on your first and second read, run the football, and that will play in fantasy football. But from a long-term perspective, I am a little bit more concerned about Jayden Daniels relative to the rest of this year, but I'm still, the absolute floor for this guy is 105 because I recognize what the fantasy ceiling is.
Yeah, and I will say, out of the teams that picked at the top from a schematic standpoint, him landing on Washington made the most sense. Obviously, Cliff Kingsbury, his offense known for the outside shot nature that we've seen both at his USC stint and obviously when he was in Arizona with Kyler Murray. And I could see him trying to deploy him in a similar way like we saw with Kyler Murray when he was with the Arizona Cardinals. So that would be your bull case. Obviously, Kyler Murray, top 5 level quarterback, or I maybe not top 5, but he was at least a top 8 quarterback in terms of points per game in his rookie season. That would be the bull case.
Back top 5 seasons, 2020 and 2021. So, and he got injured in a lot of those years too. And that's what, part of the issue could be for Jayden Daniels at the next level as well. But Jayden Daniels, you said, if he gets deployed like Kyler Murray, and maybe that speaks volumes to what DeAndre Hopkins and Terry McLaurin kind of would have as an overlap in terms of production ceiling. Yeah. But yeah, I view the talent around Jayden Daniels as something that has potential, but not something that I think can absolutely elevate and carry him. He's going to need to do a lot himself, obviously.
Yeah, like the ceiling case, like you said, is absolutely there with Jayden Daniels. It's just my concerns more so stem with the prospect himself. I mean, we're going to get into JJ McCarthy in a second, but from a prospect standpoint, I had identical grades on Jayden versus JJ McCarthy from an NFL, fit standpoint from real life football. Obviously in fantasy, we don't really care how good of real life passers they are, hence why Jayden Daniels is in this year, because the ceiling is Lamar Jackson, the ceiling is Kyler Murray plus. But at the end of the day, I just can't take him over a superstar level quarterback like I see with Drake May, a superstar level prospect like I seen with Malik Neighbors. I just had so much more confidence when I was watching them as prospects than I did with Jayden Daniels. So he finds himself in this tier because the upside is undeniable, but at the same time, he's the clear 5 for me.
Not to mention, I think people forget that Drake May will be 70% the rusher that Jayden Daniels is. It's not that we're talking about a complete pocket passing quarterback versus a rushing quarterback, one who happened to be better. It's that Drake May also can provide 600 rushing yards and 6 rushing touchdowns to the Patriots offense. And maybe Jayden Daniels rushes for 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns. That's very possible, but it's not like you're getting nothing from Drake May as a runner. And he is a much more advanced passer, despite what some people have said about him. I just personally disagree with those takes that Drake May has no mechanics, can't throw the ball on target or anything. I think he has some minor flaws, but he's also 3 years younger than Jayden Daniels, and he has the ability to get better in those areas. So this next tier of players, we have 2 guys, Rome Odunze, JJ McCarthy. Pre-draft, We did have Brock Bowers in this tier as well. I would say in any really heavy tight end premium formats, he probably would still find his way in this tier. But given the Las Vegas Raiders landing spot, I do believe he's a slight tier behind these guys. So with Rome Odunze, I mean, for me, of the 3 wide receivers, he gets a nutted landing spot. I mean, early on in his career, people might be concerned that DJ Moore is there, Keenan Allen is there, Cole Kmet is there. What kind of target ceiling can we expect from Rome Odunze as a rookie? I would point to the fact that Rome Odunze is the 5th best wide receiver prospect in the FSE prospect model since 2016. So yes, you heard that correctly. There is 3 wide receivers in this class that ranked inside the top 5 prospects in the model's history since 2016. That's just how good these top 3 guys are. And Rome Odunze is now tethered to a quarterback that we believe has the ability to be a top 5 quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, no, 100%. And in terms of context, like I said earlier, if we view Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison as your first round type of startup guys, the 103 to 105 range is your second round startup guys. Rome Odunze and JJ McCarthy are third round startup picks. And people might hear that take and be like, oh my God, there's just so much talent at the top of the draft. Like, how can I take, these guys so high on my startups? For reference right now, JJ McCarthy is my 30th ranked overall player. Rome Odunze is my 29th overall ranked player. So we're legitimately talking about once you get to the mid-third round of your startup drafts, they're going to be top considerations. Rome Odunze, like you said, pairs with Caleb Williams at the next level, goes 9th overall to the Bears. I understand his prospect profile from an analytics standpoint doesn't quite stack up to Marvin Harrison, doesn't quite stack up to Malik Neighbors, but from a pure film standpoint, he graded as a 90. He graded as a top 10 level talent. For reference, Malik Neighbors 91, Marvin Harrison Jr. 95.5 or 96.5, I believe is what he ended up with me. So he is absolutely on that superstar level trajectory from a wide receiver position. The cons, of course, he lands into a little bit of a crowded situation in year one. We don't know how it's going to look between him and DJ Moore, him, Keenan Allen, obviously Cole Kmet there out of the backfield, DeAndre Swift. Like, there's a lot of target competition in year one. So maybe there's some JSN effect there in terms of his market value. But to be honest, man, people that are just quick to say, well, he's going to be the next JSN because of the target competition. The difference is that he's just a better wide receiver than JSN. Like, he's not the type of wide receiver that is going to fall victim to the third target in the offense. And in fact, in my opinion, I think it's more likely Rome Odunze is the number 1 target than he is the number 3. That's just what I think of this guy's talent, the physical nature he brings to that X wide receiver position, the size, the speed, the ability to attack the ball in the air. I mean, Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze are going to be a connection we hear for the next 10 to 15 years in the NFL. And it might just start in their rookie seasons, to be honest. So Rome Odunze, I think he's a surefire stud. JJ McCarthy lands in the perfect landing spot, top 10 draft capital, Minnesota Vikings trade up, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, good offensive line, Kevin O'Connell. I mean, it is the perfect landing spot you could possibly ask for a developmental quarterback. And a developmental quarterback that at 21 years old has the type of mobility, has the type of arm talent to really thrive if he can get some more reps under this team. And to be honest, man, like, we're talking about quarterback equity at this point in the draft. Getting a quarterback that will be valued as a top 15 overall in my Superflex rankings at the 107 just kind of goes to show you how ludicrous this class is.
Yeah, I mean, when you think of JJ McCarthy, just picture Brock Purdy dropped into the Minnesota Vikings offense with more talent, basically. That's what JJ McCarthy represents. So, yeah, and like with these young quarterbacks, how many young quarterbacks have we seen come into the NFL, like Bryce Young last year, where there's nothing around them? They don't have good coaching. They don't have a good offensive line. Like, none of that exists for JJ McCarthy. He has great coaching, a great offensive line, the best receiver in the league that he's throwing to, in addition to a great number 2 receiver and a great tight end, a veteran running back like Aaron Jones. It's as good of a situation as I've ever seen for a young quarterback to step into, rivaling the likes of a Patrick Mahomes coming into Kansas City a couple years ago in 2017. Like, that's how good of a situation we're talking about for JJ McCarthy. They have Sam Darnold in place. They can sit, let him wait for 6 games, 10 games, 12 games, 15 games. Who cares with JJ McCarthy?
And
he is a futures pick that you're taking. I'd be hard pressed to come up with 30 to 35 names I would rather have in Dynasty than Rome Odunze and JJ McCarthy, which just proves the buying power of these rookie picks. And one last thing on Odunze too, 87th percentile success rate against man coverage, 81st against zone coverage, 92nd percentile against press coverage. He beat double coverage at a 77% rate in college. We're talking about, I mean, Matt Harmon we kind of chickened out. He almost called him the best receiver in this class. Like, he thought he was a better route runner, a better beater of man and zone coverage than even Marvin Harrison and Malik Neighbors are. So
Yeah.
I have a hard time, as much as I like pressing the button on JJ McCarthy, I have a hard time even doing it because Odunze is that good.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why I think it's the tier, because if you really need a quarterback, like I would be able to stomach it. But at the same time, I mean, these guys are just such crystal clear projections, Rome at the wide receiver position and JJ. And to be honest, with JJ at quarterback, people might be saying, well, he's got a low floor. The ceiling's obviously there because of the situation. I would almost argue that the floor is also extremely high because, to be honest, even if he doesn't start right away, the market's going to know as soon as he starts, he has the best situation in the NFL. And obviously, the complete downside is if he completely shit himself. But to be honest, even if we saw some solid, progression going forward, we can point to the fact that it's a young quarterback with this type of talent guaranteed on a rookie contract. So to be honest, man, like even if he didn't, set CJ Stroud type of records in year one, I do think that the market liquidity when it comes to JJ McCarthy is still going to be high.
Yeah, and again, how many times can we stack up quarterbacks that missed in the NFL? We don't know how to scout quarterbacks, right? That's what we always say as a dynasty community, NFL draft community. The number one thing that factors into a raw quarterback hitting at the next level or a great quarterback missing at the next level is landing spot. And the landing spot for JJ McCarthy and the Minnesota Vikings is as good as you'll ever see for a young quarterback. So JJ McCarthy, if you want more information on his prospect profile, we did break down our quarterback rankings before the NFL draft and why we're not overly concerned that he wasn't the engine of the Michigan offense. He had, great run game that he was working with. He's just always being overdrafted because he's a winner and he played at a big school. Like, we addressed those concerns in that video. We're not going to rehash all of that. But again, watching the third down reel, watching what he does outside of structure when the play breaks down, that's what's going to make him good in Minnesota.
Money moments.
And a guy that I've definitely risen on since my first watch of him all the way back in January, especially when you factor in this landing spot, learning behind another quarterback like Sam Darnold, who, for all his faults, is at least a smart quarterback who can teach him some things. Who's also been in this position before as a high draft pick, and he went to a terrible situation. He wishes he could have gone to a situation like Minnesota. We might think completely different of Sam Darnold had he gone to a situation like this coming out of college.
Yeah, no, definitely a good mentor to have on just like the shortcomings, what can happen on the field when you're a young and experienced quarterback. Having that type of influence with you to keep your head up is definitely a positive. Obviously, from a real life perspective, more than fantasy, but also with fantasy, man, you want your quarterback to be confident because you want him to hit that upper ceiling, which JJ absolutely has in his range of outcomes on that situation. So we can transition because we do view the 107 to 108 as kind of being a little bit of the tier jump, going from 107 to 108, because it would have been Brock Bowers in that 106 to 108 tier pre-draft, but he goes 13th overall, lands with the Las Vegas Raiders. Not really a settled quarterback situation long term. Obviously, they took Michael Mayer last year. That's not really as much of a concern for me because even though we believe in Michael Mayer, like the Raiders still went out there and took Brock Bowers at the 13th pick. So they must have complete belief of Brock Bowers being the best player available at that spot. With how good the landing spot was for JJ and for Rome Odunze, I definitely do have to consider Brock Bowers in this next area, especially when you talk about first-round quarterback equity, wide receiver one for the LA Chargers, wide receiver one potentially for the Jacksonville Jaguars, wide receiver one potentially for the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, people might be viewing him as going down tier, as us being more pessimistic on Brock, when really it's just late first gaining a ton of value in this NFL draft.
Yeah, it's like we go slightly down on Brock and slightly up on the other guys. We don't want to overreact and throw Brock Bowers all the way down to like 112 or 201, like some people might do in their rookie drafts. But we also don't want to underreact and say, oh, he's fine, like he had a great landing spot. It's like, no, his landing spot was objectively worse than what we expected. If he had gone to the Jets, he would be 106 to 108 with Rome Odunze and JJ McCarthy. He goes slight tier down. The other guys come a slight tier up. Yeah. Like you said, Brock Bowers, any kind of tight end premium league, you're going to be very happy with him at 108, in my opinion. He might even be a more valuable pick, and you could actually stomach taking him over the other guys if you were in desperate need of a tight end and you have any kind of tight end accelerators, first down bonuses, tight end premium, whatever the case is. I would hear arguments for 107, 106 Brock Bowers, but to me, I view those other guys a little bit ahead of him. So 108 is kind of where I settle in. Yeah. You kind of mentioned it already. Xavier Worthy went to the Kansas City freaking Chiefs, man. The exact perfect landing spot for what he does well. They used Andy Reid. Andy Reid coached Deshaun Jackson as well. Like the exact prototype profile that we have out of Xavier Worthy. Andy Reid has worked with two players that, were similar. Tyreek, of course, being the absolute ceiling. Deshaun Jackson, more of like a median projection to what Xavier Worthy does. So Xavier Worthy coming in, he doesn't have to start right away because they already have Marquise Brown. He's a young player who can learn for a little bit. I expect by the end of the season, midway through the season, Xavier Worthy to be absolutely tearing up the NFL and everybody to be saying, I cannot believe we let the Kansas City Chiefs get the fastest player in combine history. Because again, similar to what I said with JJ McCarthy, How many fast wide receivers have come into the NFL and not produced? The answer is a lot. And it's because not many of them produced like Xavier Worthy in college and went to a situation where they get to play with the best quarterback potentially who has ever lived in Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, no, pretty much. I think you hit the nail on the head there. For reference right now, like we mentioned earlier, the top 7, myself and Corey have it in the exact same order. And each of these names in this late first tier, we have in this tier. It's just different order. You have Xavier Worthy, Brock Bowers, Brian Thomas Jr., Lam McConkey, Bo Nix in that order. I have it a little bit different. I have it as Brock Bowers, Brian Thomas Jr., Bo Nix, McConkey, Worthy. But regardless, like you said, these guys are very interchangeable. And in terms of startup relative value, we're talking about Bowers maybe being a early to mid 4th round startup pick versus, the tail end of that, the Lam McConkey, the Bo Nix area kind of being at the end of the 5th round. So for reference, 4th to 5th round is typically what you're looking at, which late first being valued in the top 5 rounds of a startup goes to show you how dominant this class is. I keep saying that, but it's true.
I will ask you one question here is Xavier Worthy and Brock Bowers. I actually have Xavier Worthy ahead of Brock Bowers. So I have him at 108 in my rankings. If you were in a situation in a dynasty rookie draft, and we'll talk about this more in the strategy video towards the tail end of the first round, Xavier Worthy and Brian Thomas for you, because he was your wide receiver for pre-draft. How bad does your tight end have to be before you hit Brock Bowers over Xavier Worthy / Brian Thomas Jr.? Like for me, I would hit the button on Xavier Worthy over Brock Bowers in a neutral situation. Let's say I have George Kittle as my tight end or something like that, and I need wide receivers. For you, is it like I have to take Bowers over Thomas no matter what? Or is it if you have a decent tight end already and you don't have that great of wide receivers, and most of the leagues that you and I play in, it's 3 wide receiver, PPR, 2 flex type of leagues. So wide receivers are extremely valuable commodity, whereas tight ends, maybe not so much, even if there is a half tight end premium.
For me, it kind of comes to a threshold thing. Like what tight end do I have to not take Bowers in that spot? Obviously, you're not taking Bowers if you have Laporta. You're not taking Bowers if you have McBride, Pitts, Andrews. They're the clear top guys. I would throw Kincaid into that as well. So you got 6. Where I start considering Bowers is maybe if you have TJ Hawkinson because he's coming off the injury, or George Kittle because he's aging. At that point, if you view Bowers as the clear best player, especially in a tight end premium, I don't mind going with Bowers at the 108. But if you do have a set tight end 1, again, in some of the leagues like we're in, tight end value kind of gets devalued once you reach down the board. I don't mind just taking Brian Thomas Jr. because for reference, I mean, Brian Thomas Jr. is a guy I have valued inside my top 24 dynasty wide receivers. He's actually coming in as my dynasty wide receiver 19. So for me, similar to what you feel like with Worthy, if I'm set at tight end, I'm more than comfortable making that pick on Brian Thomas.
Yeah, I have both of those guys inside my top 22 dynasty wide receivers as well, Worthy and Thomas, even though Thomas I have after Worthy. He goes to Jacksonville, in my opinion, one of the best landing spots he could have gone to, because he doesn't have to start and be a number 1 receiver right away, because they have Gabe Davis who can stretch the field. They have Christian Kirk, who's a great target earner, PPR type of guy. Brian Thomas needed a little bit of time, in my opinion. He was a little bit raw coming out, and he's going to get a little bit of time in Jacksonville. But if he does hit and he becomes a Nico Collins, whatever comp that you had for Brian Thomas Jr. athletically, we're talking about a guy that actually has athletic comparisons to even a Julio Jones type of guy. Brian Thomas has the time to develop into that role. I very much believe that Trevor Lawrence is a franchise quarterback, and I do believe he missed a guy like this last year where Calvin Ridley was supposed to play that field stretcher role. He doesn't have the athletic gifts that Brian Thomas Jr. has. Even Gabe Davis has that downfield role to stretch the offense a little bit more. If you guys recall, with Doug Peterson's offense in Philadelphia, they were at their best in 2017 when Carson Wentz was able to stretch that offense vertically. He had Alshon Jeffrey. I believe he had Torrey Smith to stretch that offense as well. You need field stretchers in this game. It's going to help Travis Etienne in the backfield. It's going to help Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram over the middle of the field. You have a seam-busting 4-4 speed tight end to stretch the field up the middle, and you have 2 outside wide receivers with Brian Thomas and Gabe Davis, whose primary job will be to stretch the defense vertically. Trevor Lawrence is very, very well set up, even more so than he was last year.
Yeah, and in terms of specifically Brian Thomas Jr., if people kind of want an insight to what that ceiling might look like, well, guess what? I mean, we saw Justin Houston this past year. As much as I love Nico Collins was not nearly the prospect that Brian Thomas Jr. was, but what he won on with his size, with his movement ability, with his ability to attack the ball in the air down the field, he had over 100 yards per game pretty much when he was healthy this year. If Brian Thomas Jr. is the guy that I absolutely think he is when I watch him on that prospect profile, Like, we're talking about a legitimate difference maker in this offense. And guess what? If Trevor Lawrence is throwing 30, 35 touchdowns, which is definitely in the range of outcomes, in my opinion, for the caliber of quarterback he can be, Brian Thomas Jr. has the upside to score 10, 12, 15 touchdowns in any given year when Trevor Lawrence is hitting his stride.
Yeah, absolutely. And touching on Bo Nix and Ladd McConkey, and then we can move on to the next tier here is with Bo Nix. I mean, we talked about it when the pick happened on our live stream, but Denver was the best spot he could have gone to. He gets 12th overall draft capital, so you absolutely have to respect that. That's a first-round quarterback. Yeah. That's a guy that went very, very high in the draft who's going to get every opportunity to do what he does. They then took his college teammate in the 4th round in Troy Franklin to help stretch the defense vertically there. A player that should absolutely have not been in the 4th round. He should have been a 2nd-round pick, in my opinion. So you have Bo Nix coming into an offense where Sean Payton has made a living, basically a career, a potentially Hall of Fame coaching career out of taking accurate quarterbacks, running his system. Drew Brees, of course, in 2006, when he signed with the New Orleans Saints, was not expected to be a Hall of Famer someday. In addition to what Drew Brees did as a player, Sean Payton really helped him out to become the player that he became, which is an accurate quarterback gets the ball where it needs to be. So Bo Nix has Cortland Sutton, big-bodied outside wide receiver, Troy Franklin, field-stretching receiver, in addition to Josh Reynolds in the short term, and Marvin Mims potentially working as a slot, Javonte Williams, Audric Estime in the backfield, Greg Dulcich as a tight end position. Suddenly, you squint and this offense looks pretty decent if Bo Nix is the quarterback that he was at Oregon, which was set the FBS record in terms of accuracy. That's what he's going to need to do in Denver to be able to help that offense. He also was very great at the line of scrimmage, which I'm sure you're going to bring up. He was very good at getting people where they needed to be. Very smart quarterback, 6 years in college football, got better every single year of his college career, especially once he got to the University of Oregon after those first 4 years at Auburn. So Bo Nix, people are going to shrug him off. People are not going to want to draft him because he's 24 years old. He went to a nutted landing spot for what he wanted to do. As we kind of talked about with all of these guys, the reason that Bowers, the tier gap was closed is because all 4 of these players went to ideal landing spots for what they do. And we'll talk about McConkey in a second.
Yeah, in terms of exactly what Sean Payton said on Bo Nix, he called him the most accurate passer in college football history. He's extremely smart, handles the protections, and he's tough to sack. That's what I want from my quarterback. It makes sense. Like, he is the perfect fit. He fits like a glove for what Sean Payton wants to do on offense. Sean Payton doesn't need your Kawhi Leonard, LeBron James, power-styled small forward as his quarterback. He just needs his John Stockton. Be that efficient distributor. Get the ball out of your hands. Be smart. Make good decisions. And on top of that, like you said, they surrounded him with enough weapons. Obviously, Javonte and Audric Estime out of the backfield. We believe in Greg Dulcich. You add his college teammate now with Troy Franklin, who they traded up to the top of the 4th round to be able to select. I believe it was either the 1st or the 2nd pick of the 4th round. So despite him falling, he's too good of a player, in my opinion, when I'm talking about Troy Franklin, to have been on the board at the 4th round. So the Broncos take advantage of that, snag him up, pair him next to Bo Nix. I mean, we're going to be talking about Troy Franklin in a second and why he's such a good fit next to Bo Nix like we saw in college. But, I mean, it's tough not to love Bo Nix. We had him as our quarterback. You actually had him as your quarterback 4, but we both had him as a top 5 quarterback entering this class. And him going 12th overall is the vindication I needed.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody's in the role that they need to be in. Cortland Sutton's your X receiver. Troy Franklin doesn't have to see press coverage because of that, right? He's going to be a Z receiver flanker guy. Marvin Mims moves into the slot as his natural role there. And you also have Dulcich coming back, hopefully with healthy hamstrings this year. And then you got 2 running backs who can pound the rock up the middle. Everybody is exactly where they need to be honest. I think that everybody is in their right position. And I'm quite excited about this Broncos offense as soon as year 1, I think, because Bo Nix had so much experience in college, he might come out and have a very good rookie season because of all the quarterbacks in this class, he had the most starts, most dropbacks, most time played in college football. He was the most pro-ready guy outside of, Caleb Williams, of course, because he's just that much of a stud. But to me, Bo Nix, right behind him, was ready to start week 1 of his rookie season. That's exactly what they're going to need from him because they don't have any other quarterbacks really on the roster that can do anything. So Ladd McConkey, final guy of this tier. It's very simple with him. The Chargers lost Keenan Allen. Ladd McConkey can come in, be a slot receiver, be a Z receiver. Hell, he can even play X receiver at times. Ladd McConkey profiles as a PPR stud because he gets open in the short to intermediate areas as good probably already as Keenan Allen did late in his career. So with Ladd McConkey, Jim Harbaugh is going to run the ball. He's going to want to use J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards and Kamani Vidal, who they drafted in the 6th round. He's going to want to play smart football, good defense, make Justin Herbert make good decisions. Of course, they have 2 outside stud left tackle and right tackles now with Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt, who they took at 5th overall. Ladd McConkey is the short to intermediate feaster of this offense. Josh Palmer is a fine number 3 receiver. Maybe you get a field stretching role at a Quentin Johnston, and suddenly, again, you squint and this offense actually makes a lot of sense. And Ladd McConkey, to me, has a chance to have 130, 150 targets his rookie season.
Yeah, like we mentioned, for example, when it comes to a guy like Malik Neighbors being able to manage volume in that Giants wide receiver room, well, guess what? Ladd McConkey, same type of thing. And on top of that, having that insulation to be paired with Justin Herbert, one of the top 5 quarterbacks on this planet, that's obviously a big start. So in terms of Ladd McConkey, this is already a guy we had higher on from the pre-draft cycle. I believe he was your wide receiver 6. He was my wide receiver 5. Or was he also your wide receiver 5?
He was 6 for me. Yeah, I had Thomas at 5.
So he was a top 6 wide receiver for both of us from a film standpoint. He lands at the top of the second to the most ideal spot for his skill set, basically taking on that Keenan Allen role. I mean, yeah, at the 112, I'm licking my chops if I can get my hands on Ladd McConkey.
Yeah, like we said, these late first got nutted landing spots, literally. Like, yeah. I couldn't have picked a better landing spot for each of these guys. The only one, maybe Brian Thomas goes to the Bills instead, but honestly, man, these guys went to all of their perfect landing spots. Nix, Worthy, and McConkey, best landing spots they could have possibly gone to, given the relative range of the draft they were supposed to go. 201 to 205 tier. Again, we can kind of go through these guys a little bit. The battle for RB1, I'm sure, is something that people are going to talk about. Jonathan Brooks goes in the mid-second round, early second round to the Carolina Panthers. Trey Benson, the second pick of the third round, to the Arizona Cardinals. Then we have Keon Coleman and Xavier Legette, both top 35 NFL draft picks. Coleman to the Buffalo Bills, who of course don't have a whole lot going on at wide receiver, trading away Stephon Diggs. Gabe Davis leads in free agency. And then Xavier Legette was actually a first-round pick of the Carolina Panthers, who we've heard Dave Canales come out and say, we want to use him like Mike Evans. He's our big-bodied X-wide receiver. And then, of course, we got to fit Michael Penix in somewhere because he went 8th overall in the NFL draft to the Atlanta Falcons, who presumably won't use him for the first year, maybe first 2 years of his career, because they signed Kirk Cousins to a massive extension with much of the guaranteed money in the first 2 seasons. So sorting through this tier, again, is what do you need? Do you need a running back? Jonathan Brooks and Benson makes sense. Do you need a wide receiver at the 201, 202? Keon Coleman and Xavier Legette makes sense. Do you need a quarterback? Michael Penix makes sense. So for me, any one of these guys, really 201 to 205, it's all team composition. What do you need? Let's start with the battle for RB1, because obviously they play the same position. So we can actually decide between these two guys.
Yeah, 100%. So we'll talk about Brooks and then we'll talk about Benson. Brooks finds his way off the board in a trade up, by the way, with Carolina Panthers. So the Carolina Panthers initially picked at 39 overall. I believe they traded down to 52, netted a 2025 2 for next year, but then also traded back up from 52 to 46 to go snag Jonathan Brooks. And that was all the vindication I needed for how teams feel about his knee injury. Because guess what? A team won't trade up inside the top 50 to take him as the RB1 off the board if they have concerns about that ACL injury he suffered at Texas last year. This is a ready-made 3-down type of skill set. For a first-year starter, I'm just shocked at how instinctual he was as a runner at Texas. That was definitely his big calling card. Can contribute in terms of the passing game, is a slasher between the tackles. Profile similarly to a guy like Aaron Jones. We both had that comp for him as well in the pre-draft cycle. And for me, people might see the Carolina landing spot and automatically think, oh, damn, like that's an awful offense to walk into. But to be honest, they signed some interior help in free agency, I believe, with Damian Lewis and with Robert Hunt. They signed to some big contracts. Dave Canales coming in, and everything I've heard from Dave Canales so far, when they took Xavier Legette, when they took Jonathan Brooks, he has a vision for how he wants to run this offense. On top of all that, we're OG Bryce Young lovers. We think he can get back up to that level after a disappointing rookie season. And to be honest, people are just kind of pricing this as a bad landing spot, but I think he can be a bell cow in year 1 once he's fully healthy, whether that's week 5, week 6, week 7. I really like the value. And as much as I like Trey Benson going off the board at the top of the 3rd round to the Arizona Cardinals, I just think that the NFL kind of told us their thoughts on Brooks versus Benson, and that's going to be my tiebreaker. They are virtually tied on my board right now, back-to-back on my board, but knowing that the NFL traded up and took Brooks in the top 50 is enough vindication for me to make that swap.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything you said. I mean, I saw Dave Canales turn Rachaad White with my Buccaneers last year into an RB1 in fantasy, and I think he can do the same thing with Jonathan Brooks, who profiles as a better early down guy than White, and a similar capable receiver out of the backfield. So I do believe that Brooks has a chance to be really, really solid. And again, The fact that they traded up for him, the fact that he was a top 50 NFL draft pick tells me really everything I need to know about his knee, because the Cowboys, I don't know if you saw this, like Jerry Jones literally said after day one of the draft, like, yeah, we're going to take Brooks tomorrow. And they didn't even get him because they literally made it very clear that they were going to take Jonathan Brooks. And Stephen Jones is like, hey, dude, why don't you give him the whole draft board? Why don't you? Like, you got an 80-year-old like geriatric owner saying that you're going to take the Texas running back, and the Carolina Panthers are like, well, shit, we better trade up for this guy now. And that's exactly what ended up happening. So love Jonathan Brooks. Again, I believe that Benson was the better prospect. And also, I keep coming back to this point. Trey Benson will be healthy year one, and he will be able to potentially win out his job. So even though I think James Conner is a better running back than Chuba Hubbard, which is what the backfield competition these guys are working with, Benson is healthy. He's going to be ready to go, ready-made. He's also a better athlete than Jonathan Brooks, so I believe he potentially even has a little bit of a higher ceiling than Brooks does in terms of overall dynasty value. It's really, what do you trust? Do you trust the second-round draft capital with Brooks, or do you trust the early production, which for me at the running back position means a whole lot? So that's what I'm trusting with Benson, but there's a good chance I never have to make that decision, because in most drafts, Jonathan Brooks goes ahead anyway. So if I want Benson over Brooks, I can trade down a few spots and usually get him.
Yeah, and to be honest, it's the type of situation for me where if you have 201 through 203 in multiple drafts and you want to mix your spots between taking, Brooks plus Coleman or Benson plus Leggett or Penix plus Brooks or, Leggett plus Benson, like, this tier is so fluid to me that it's really a pick and choose type of tier. What do you need? Do you need a running back? Do you need a wide receiver with some upside, which despite them having, some volatile floors with Coleman and Leggett respectively, definitely have the ceilings to be top 20 overall dynasty assets at wide receiver? Or do you want to take the quarterback, which, while he might not get onto the field right away, was still taken top 10 in the NFL draft? Like, the fact that we're talking about a top 10 selected quarterback potentially being at the start to mid end of your second round of your rookie drafts, I feel like I just sound like a bird. I keep repeating things over and over again, but this class is phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking on Leggett and Coleman, I would say if you squint, you can say that their landing spots weren't good. And the reason I say this is because Coleman goes to a situation where I believe he will be expected to be an X wide receiver right away, because they have Curtis Samuel, they have Khalil Shakir, they have all these like slot over the middle guys. And we both agreed on Coleman. His best usage might be in the slot at the next level. So I'm a little worried that the Bills are going to force him on the X receiver role, maybe even play kind of a Gabe Davis-ish kind of role as well. And he might not be able to do that year one of his career because he's only 20 years old. He definitely needed some route running refinement, but if they can coach him up, I think he can do that, because I really did like Keon Coleman's film. I thought he played fast. I thought he was physical. I thought he was tough. I thought he was good after the catch. He just got to get that extra little bit of development, and I think the Bills are a capable enough coaching staff to give that to him. So I'm okay taking the risk at the 203, 204 in my drafts. And Xavier Leggett also maybe was better suited to play in the slot at the next level, better suited to be a big slot type of guy. And based on Canales' comments, based on Leggett, I do believe he will be forced to be their X receiver, Deontay Johnson, the Z, Jonathan Mingo, and Adam Thielen probably working into the slot. So again, you can make the argument that deployment-wise, maybe these guys are a little bit sketchy, but I want wide receivers attached to Josh Allen, and we believe enough in Bryce Young that I think Leggett can help him take the step forward. So with those two guys, they're risky, 203, 204, but I'm okay taking the risk.
I will comment back on David Canales in terms of trying to pigeonhole him, because at his press conference, man, I heard what I needed to hear, man. He said, listen, like, we're not going to overwhelm his route diet right away. We know what he's good at. And to be honest, what he is good at, what he thrives in, in space type of concepts, running drags, running screens, running crossers, get the ball in his hands, let him create after the catch. That's all we ask from our wide receivers, is basically what Dave Canales said on record. So I don't think they made this pick to just pigeonhole him at X and give him the whole route trade right off from day one. I really do feel like they're going to make it a slow burn, let him get up to speed, be that, crossing route demon. Bryce Young can pitch the ball down the field. Well, guess what? Xavier Leggett, absolutely dominant on crossing routes. So if he can get him involved down the field, 30, 40-yard splash plays, get him around the line of scrimmage, let him create after the catch. You're still talking about a 6'1", 220-pound, 4.39 speed type of athlete here. Like, I'm optimistic that it's not going to be him being overwhelmed in year one. It's more so going to be like what we saw from Christian Watson in year one, where they got him up to speed. They didn't force the whole X wide receiver thing on him right away. And we were able to see Christian Watson down the stretch in 2022 legitimately be a league winner in fantasy.
Yeah, it's almost like he wants to use him half like Mike Evans and the other half like Chris Godwin, which is kind of
Yeah.
weird because like Godwin's the crossing route, use him in the slot, get him on drag routes, screens, that kind of stuff. But the field stretching nature of Xavier Legette is more the Mike
Yeah.
Evans plan. So yeah, both of these guys make sense as early second rounders. Michael Penix, of course, I believe he will sit for 2 years personally. I think he will sit for 2 years behind Kirk Cousins. It's possible that he gets on the field early because Cousins is coming off of an Achilles tear. He's 36 years old. Maybe this looks like a regrettable contract for the Falcons after one season, and Penix is on there in year 2. But regardless, I do think he loses a little bit of value relative to a guy like Bo Nix because, A, I thought Nix was a better prospect anyway. Both of these guys go to good landing spots. I mean, Penix is going to be able to push the ball downfield to Drake London, to Kyle Pitts, and those type of guys. I just believe that Penix will probably be a slower burn. If you're in a long-term productive struggle, you need a third quarterback, and you want to take Penix as high as 201, 202, I don't really blame you. I just personally would take those first 4 guys ahead of Michael Penix, and he would need to fall to 205 and beyond for me to take the shot on him. But I still actually really do like him. It's not that I don't like Michael Penix, and some people are going to go to the comments and be like, how could you take an 8th overall pick quarterback at 108? Or who went 108 in the draft at 205. It's more that I just love the other prospects in this class. It's a function of how good the class is. It has nothing to do with Penix.
Yeah, no, I think you made the exact case that I believe in as well. And for reference, like if you're a contending team, let's just say, you ended up getting a second in the startup, but your team's looking contending. Let's just say you have, I don't know, Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott, and Derek Carr, your quarterback core, and you maybe want some more upside as your quarterback 3. Michael Penix would be your guy, because I'll be honest, man, like if he falls to 205 in a lot of your drafts, it almost feels like beachfront real estate, man. Like we're talking about an almost guaranteed return on investment the minute he steps onto the field.
Yeah, exactly. And we weren't even high on Penix, man. Like we didn't even
Yeah.
think he was the most accurate quarterback over the middle. I didn't think he played at the athleticism level he tested at. I
Agreed.
thought he was more of an immobile pocket passer. So with Penix, we have these concerns, but we do respect the draft capital, and we are going to take our shots at 205 if he falls there. So let's rattle this video off here with the last tier: Ricky Pearsall, Adonai Mitchell, Jalen Polk, Jalen Wright, Troy Franklin, Blake Corum, and Jalen McMillan. With each of these guys, they bring something different to the table. With Pearsall, I mean, you got first overall capital or first round draft capital to the San Francisco 49ers. Short term, Ayuk and Debo are still there, but if they move on from one of those guys during the season, before the season, after the season, you got a good appreciable asset there. Adonai Mitchell, high ceiling prospect, but it's not a good landing spot, in my opinion. You got the Indianapolis Colts run heavy offense. Pittman is there long-term. They locked him up this offseason. I believe, at least at this point in time, maybe Adonai Mitchell proves me wrong in this in the long term. I think Josh Downs is a better target earner than Adonai Mitchell today. So it's possible to me that Adonai Mitchell has the type of rookie season where we're excited about what we see in the flashes, but he doesn't earn a whole lot of targets. So for me, I know you're going to push back on that, but to me, Josh Downs will earn more targets than Adonai Mitchell rookie season.
Rookie season, I think that's a fair assumption. But I mean, at the end of the day, if Adonai Mitchell is the player that I evaluated on film, a guy that I had ranked as the wide receiver 6 with one of the highest ceilings in this class, like Josh Downs is not stopping me from pressing the button on him, to be honest. And that's kind of where I land. Of course, like he ends up being the 207 for us consensus. He's a guy that I have ranked, I believe, as my 18th or 19th overall player. So I agree with you on the surface that he is a tier below the other guys in terms of the first round capital of Legette, in terms of the fit with Buffalo for Coleman, and obviously the running backs of Michael Penix Jr. But I am willing to take Adonai Mitchell's shot once you get to that 208 range where he's the best player on the board. Josh Downs has not stopped me from taking Adonai Mitchell, because I do feel like the ceiling is absolutely there for him to be a top 10 receiver. And I understand, at least for the first year, possibly even year 2, Michael Pittman's going to be the leading target. But from a talent standpoint, I think Adonai Mitchell can be the best wide receiver on this team when we look back in 3 years.
And I said it when we were evaluating Mitchell, I said he needs to go to a place where he's not tasked with being the number 1 wide receiver right away, because I don't think he can handle it. And he did go to a situation like that. And if Anthony Richardson can hit his ceiling, then who knows? Maybe this offense isn't super run heavy and they do actually throw the ball because Richardson's playing well. I just have concerns about the scheme. Being a run-heavy scheme, the quarterback being not the type of quarterback I really want for my fantasy wide receivers. Of course, I love Richardson himself in Dynasty because he can run, but as a thrower, I'm not a huge fan of that. And Mitchell himself, too, being a little bit risky. So it's kind of like 3 factors of risks all kind of intermingling together, which makes me want Mitchell to go to my league mates, but I will take the shot 207, 208 if he's on the board.
Yeah, and the beauty of it is this is a very risky profile to bet on, no doubt. But at the same time, what's so different from the profile of Adonai Mitchell going 52nd to the Colts Then George Pickens going 52nd overall to the Pittsburgh Steelers a couple years ago. Because in terms of prospects, they were relatively similar. Only you're having to take George Pickens at the 111, the 112, the 201 area. The fact that you're getting such a discount because of how good this class is on Adonai Mitchell just speaks volumes. Like, it's much more stomachable spending the 207, 208 on this profile than it was when we were having to do with Pickens taking him potentially in the first round.
Well, and I agree, because there was a range of outcomes where we were going to have to spend the 111, 112 on Mitchell if he got a good landing spot, if he went in the first round. And I feel better now about Mitchell spending the 207. If I miss on the 207, it doesn't hurt me nearly as bad as missing on the 111 like he probably would have been if he was a first round pick to Buffalo or something like that. So Jalen Polk, Jalen Wright, and Troy Franklin, the next couple guys that we have here. With Jalen Polk, 37th overall draft capital. He was my wide receiver 12 pre-draft. I think he was overdrafted slightly. I think he probably should have went in like the 50s or the 60s potentially, but the Patriots need solidified, solid wide receivers. And that's what Jalen Polk can be. He can come in and be a number 2 caliber receiver right away, maybe command 110 targets his rookie season, similar to my comp for him, which was Rashee Rice, who went to the Kansas City Chiefs. And both of us believe in Drake May long-term. So if you squint, this looks pretty good like a landing spot. It's a situation where no real targets are there. They drafted Javon Baker in round 4, who's interesting. They have Demario Douglas and Kendrick Bourne, who are just guys at this point. They're good number 3 receivers, good slot receivers. But if Jalen Polk can be what Rashee Rice was for the Chiefs last year, I think he can come in and legitimately lead this team in targets as a rookie.
Yeah, and with Jalen Polk, like you said, like, he feels like a very safe second round pick. Once you get to the 209, the 210 area, you can bank on the 37th overall capital. You can bank on the compete level, the yak ability, the translatability to the next level. And it's pretty much a guarantee, in my opinion, that if you select Polk, you're probably going to hit a single or a double. I just don't know if there's a home run nature. Like, can Polk be a top 12 dynasty receiver? Probably not. Can he be a top 30 dynasty wide receiver? I think that's in the range of outcomes.
Yeah, it really all depends how good Polk is and how good Drake May is. Because I think if Drake May is a superstar, like if he's an absolute stud quarterback, then you could get there with Polk. You could get him all the way up to wide receiver 19 or whatever. But it's possible that he's kind of like the Rashee Rice situation, where they're going to look to draft a number 1 wide receiver the next year, right? Like if Polk hits and he's a good number 2 and they draft Luther Burden next year, that wouldn't shock me one bit, but that's still a solid top 30 dynasty receiver. Like you said, Jalen Wright goes to a situation in Miami where short term, he's probably not going to have a huge role. Achan's there, Mostert's there, but I think he can be the future Mostert, right? He's the bigger back. He can be the goal line guy. Devon Achan's undersized. Jalen Wright has upside to be a speed demon in addition to a short yardage back. He's got to learn a little bit of the nuances of the position. He's a young player, but I love Jalen Wright, man. He's the type of guy that I'm very happy to get at the 210, 211, 212 of rookie drafts, because I think he has a lot of upside.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, this is just such a Miami pick. You're taking the speed demon running back with 95th percentile speed score, 95th percentile burst score at 210 pounds. Like, it makes a ton of sense, man. Like, realistically, in the long term, you have your change of pace guy with Devon Achan, your 190 pounder. Between him and Jalen Wright, I know who my bet's going to be on who might get the goal line opportunity moving forward.
Yeah, exactly. And this is similar to Achan last year. It's like, fit is important for running backs, and this is an excellent fit. And honestly, that's the truth of this whole class. A lot of these guys went to great fits. Nix, Worthy, McConkey, Brooks, like Benson, all these guys went to absolutely fantastic fits with these skill sets here. So Wright is yet another example of a guy that just went to a great fit. Next guy, same thing. Troy Franklin went to an absolutely outstanding fit for what he does well. He can be Sean Payton's downfield field stretcher like we wanted to see from Traquan Smith early on in his career. Like we wanted to see. Yeah, Kenny Stills, exactly. Perfect example of that. I think Troy Franklin can be that in Sean Payton's offense. And of course, he has a leg up on every receiver there because he already played with Bo Nix in college and they had a great chemistry. And Troy Franklin, even though he fell to the 4th round, was an excellent prospect on paper. On paper, in the FSC prospect model, he is the single best day 3 wide receiver that has ever come out and gotten day 3 capital. And speaking of that, 102 overall sometimes sneaks its way into the 3rd round. So it's not like he went 196 in the draft. He went 102. He was barely a day 3 pick. And he stacks up with the likes of Puka Nacua and Amon-Ra St. Brown, Tyler Johnson, some of those guys that were considered to be great day 3 prospects, sleeper caliber players. And Troy Franklin's the type of guy that you no longer have to spend the 111, the 112 on had he gone in the top 50 of the draft. You can get him at the 208, the 209, the 210 in your rookie draft. And again, he went to a great fit, great landing spot with his college quarterback.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think we pretty much wrapped it on Troy Franklin. Obviously, it sucks that he went in the fourth round. And to be honest, if he went on day two, he would probably be closer to that, 201 to 205 tier. But I mean, we just got to live with it. Yes, fourth round draft capital. But like you said, Puka Nacua hit, Amon St. Brown hit. We don't want to completely overrule day three guys just based off the draft capital, especially when we know there's a difference between top 50 capital versus fourth round capital. There isn't much of a difference between 78th overall capital versus 102nd.
Not to mention too, like, why did we even evaluate these guys? If we were just going to rely on draft capital after the draft, like, why even scout these guys? Why even go through the process of talking through them and working through them from January to April? It's like, if we were just going to rely on the draft capital and draft whoever went higher, there was no point of even scouting Franklin. And Franklin was my wide receiver 7 pre-draft, and I'm going to stick to that. Otherwise, why did I even scout him in the first place? Again, he's not still my wide receiver 7. He's got to move down a little bit, but I am still going to be higher than market on him because I believed in him pre-draft. And even though he had some issues with like working through contact and contested catches and ball tracking, I believe that Sean Payton and his staff can coach that out of him. And playing with his college quarterback, like I said, is a huge, huge advantage to him getting on the field early on. Closing out this tier, we have a couple guys plus some honorable mentions: Blake Corum and Jalen McMillan. With Corum, I mean, you got basically Kyron Williams with better draft capital here. I believe Kyron will lead the backfield in touches and all that kind of stuff. Same. But it wouldn't shock me if they use these guys interchangeably at some point in time, and everyone's going to be kicking themselves that they didn't sell Kyron Williams when he was worth a mid-first rounder, top 10 dynasty draft capital type of running back. I still have him ranked relatively high, but Blake Corum is the type of guy that can come in and do exactly what Kyron does, which is be efficient on early downs, provide some, bursty spark plays, 20-plus yard type of runs, give you a little something in the receiving game. I think Kyron bests him in that area, but Blake Corum is going to be a part of this offense, in my opinion.
It's very similar to like when the Seahawks took Charbonnet last year and everybody's like, oh, like fantasy, like this sucks. Like, and it limits both of their ceilings. But from a real life standpoint, like having a number of good backs to be able to cycle out, keep them fresh, makes sense. Now, obviously, from a fantasy standpoint, you would have wanted to see Corum go to like the Cowboys. You would have wanted to see Kyron Williams have this backfield to himself. But I mean, this is one of the best backfield situations that you could possibly ask for, even though he may not get the volume. If Kyron Williams were to ever go down, Blake Corum would be ranked as a top 6 overall fantasy running back on a given week. Like, that is the level of upside we see here. Assuming Matthew Stafford's healthy, assuming Sean McVay is, doing Sean McVay things, Blake Corum is the type of back that can take on volume and score on the goal line, inside the 5, inside the 10, when asked upon, based on what he was able to do at Michigan. If you're getting closer to 2021, 2022 talent level Blake Corum, like, he's got the opportunity to win the backfield for himself, to be honest. Like, I love Kyron Williams. And again, I prefer Kyron Williams in Dynasty, and he will be ranked in my top 10 Dynasty running backs. But there is still a range of outcome where Blake Corum is the best running back on that team.
Yeah, absolutely. Corum has the ability, like you said, even, once Kyron moves on in free agency 2 years from now, he was drafted in 2022. He played out 2023. He's got 2 years left on his contract. If we get high-end handcuff with upside Blake Corum for 2 seasons, and then he takes over the backfield in 2026 when Kyron Williams is gone, then he could be a great value pick in rookie drafts at the 210, 211, 212 area. I'll talk about Jalen McMillan going to my Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I believe he will be our day one slot receiver. I think we've talked about it on a number of occasions as a team. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers franchise has said we need Chris Godwin back on the outside where he's capable of winning because he's healthy. He's not coming off of an ACL tear anymore. He is 100% healthy. Of course, we know what Mike Evans does. We know what he brings to the table. Trey Palmer, more of a number 4 receiver, field stretcher type. Jalen McMillan can be our day one slot receiver for Baker Mayfield. That's been a crucial part of what he does. He throws really well over the middle. Of course, Jarvis Landry in Cleveland had great production there. So I think Jalen McMillan, he was my wide receiver 11 coming into the class. And he went to a situation that is very conducive to what he does well. So for me, Jalen McMillan makes a lot of sense in this offense. And I think he could be one of the steals of the draft in terms of where you're getting him, because I've seen him go in the mid 3rd round, late 3rd round at times in some people's rookie drafts. And I think we could be talking about the next Jaden Reed, where we knew he was a good projection. We knew it was a good fit. And you take him at the end of the 2nd round, in the early 3rd round, and you just profit. He becomes a top 35 dynasty wide receiver. Godwin and Evans are old, man. Like, it's possible that long-term Jalen McMillan becomes something.
Yeah, no, for sure. Obviously, it doesn't look like a sexy landing spot on the surface, given that, Rashad Wright gets some targets out of the backfield. Obviously, those top 2 wide receivers are studs in their own right. But like you said, he's got his role as the slot receiver on this team. He was both of our wide receiver 11s coming into the draft, and he did get top 100 capital. So we shouldn't be able to ignore that. But I think that's pretty much set. Those are our top 24 consensus. The honorable mentions, if you will, a couple guys each maybe that were close to making the cut. Well, the first guy that actually did make my cut, my 22nd overall player, is Jermaine Burton from the Cincinnati Bengals, goes 80th overall. T. Higgins, we don't know about the long-term nature of his existence as a Cincinnati Bengal. And Jermaine Burton, despite being, flawed from a character standpoint, a little bit inconsistent at times on his Alabama film, really does show flashes to be a very, very good separator, especially down the field. And with Joe Burrow, we've seen his ability to stretch the field, his ability to throw, 35, 38 touchdown passes in the NFL. If T. Higgins were to move on, Jermaine Burton's got the opportunity to be the wide receiver 2 on this offense after Jamar Chase.
Yeah, absolutely. And the guy that just missed the cut for me was Malachi Corley. We talked about him as a very scheme dependent, very landing spot dependent wide receiver coming into the draft. I think the Jets was a good landing spot for him. I mean, you got basically like a supercharged Randall Cobb in terms of an athletic profile. And of course, Aaron Rodgers played with Randall Cobb for a number of years. And I believe actually Randall Cobb might still be on the roster with the Jets right now. So I feel pretty good about Malachi Corley's ability to walk in there day one and be their slot receiver and potentially develop into more, because I think he has the athletic ability, and potentially Garrett Wilson and some of the other guys there could coach him up to becoming a better route runner and potentially an outside wide receiver long-term, maybe even the number 2 long-term opposite Garrett Wilson. He was drafted inside the top 65 overall pick. So it's pretty good draft capital for Malachi Corley. I mean, Audric Estime and Marshawn Lloyd also just missed the cut for me. If you needed a tight end, I think Ben Sinnott would also be in this range. Yeah. That if it's a tight end premium league, you could consider at the late second round portion, because he got top 55 draft capital to the Washington Commanders. And we all know the narrative of young quarterbacks liking their young tight ends and their safety blankets over the middle of the field. I think him and Jaden Daniels could develop a rapport as soon as rookie mini camps, right? You think about they're going to be working together more so than even the veterans early on. And I think Jaden Daniels and Ben Sinnott could develop that chemistry. So that is the end of the top 24 of our rankings. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you want our entire Dynasty rookie draft guide with all of our write-ups on all these players, all of our grades on all these players, player cards, comparisons, everything that you could want, that is available now, the fully updated final version post-draft on the site, flockfantasy.com. Use the promo code FSE when you sign up for 30% off, a 7-day free trial. Annual subscribers save 6 months for free as well. Head on over to Flock Fantasy to check that out. We also have our trade calculator live. We have our My Teams feature. You can load in your rosters. You can see all of your players, all of your league mates' teams, and all that good stuff. That feature is extremely valuable. And of course, too, if you're already a Flock subscriber, or if you just want a bonus offer, you don't want to sign up for the site, you just want our draft guide, just want our rookie rankings, new users on Underdog Fantasy can deposit using promo code FSE. You'll get 100% back on your first deposit, and you'll get our Dynasty rookie draft guide as well as our Dynasty all 22 film breakdowns, which are also live on the site for free as a free gift for using our promo code on Underdog Fantasy. So if that interests you, both things will be linked down in the description and in the pinned comment as well. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.